Today's guest was just 8 years old when he was sent away to one of England's most expensive boarding schools. There, he says he suffered incredibly cruel abuse at the hands of his teachers. And he joins us now to talk about his experience, the homesickness and utter helplessness, all documented in his memoir, and why speaking out has given a voice to so many other people. Please welcome Charles Spencer. Thank you so much, Charles. It says it. I was going to say it myself at the back of the book. It's shocking and moving. I mean, you've written many books, but I can imagine that this was the most deeply personal and the most difficult one. To find the strength to write, because suddenly you're sharing a very personal part of your life with all of us.
It was a very difficult book to do. It took me 5 years to write it. And there were many days where I just looked at the computer screen and it looked back at me. I'd come to terms with what had happened to me in terms of all sorts of abuse. But it was when I spoke to people who had been at the school with me and heard about them, it was crippling. I would just be stunned at what I was hearing, things I didn't know, because, of course, abuse of children takes place in silos. So the abuser isn't... you don't know who else has been abused. But when I was talking to these people who had terrible things happen to them, life-altering, it was numbing. I felt completely... all energy was sapped from me.
And did you never speak about it while you were at school to other pupils, or...?
It's a very good question. So, essentially, what I found was the same with the other people who were victims and me, was we were so young. This is a school I went to when I was 8 till 13, that we didn't have any context to our lives. We didn't know how awful it was. So, and also, we came from a background and an era, I'm 60, an era where talking to our parents wasn't such a thing. I mean, I've been the most boring father ever to my 7 children, which isn't bad for a Protestant. But I'm actually...
Nothing to a Catholic.
Well, nothing. But what I've done with them is, on the school run, I've always said, are the teachers being nice to you? I've always done this checklist, and they go, yes, Dad, you know. But I think the story here is not about... It's not because it's posh kids in a boarding school. It's about the vulnerability of children to very bad people.
But the thing that always strikes me as well, though, is, you know, your father would have gone to boarding school, his father before him, you know, and all of them, I imagine, to some extent will have experienced hardship and probably abuse. And yet, they carry on down the centuries, sending kids off at, I think you were 8 years old, vulnerable age. So was there a sense at all that, of incredulity later, that your father had put you through the same thing that he probably experienced? It's
such a good point. I heard from a friend of mine who lives in Australia today who was very badly sexually abused at his school, different one to mine. And he said, what were my parents thinking, even today? And I've heard that from all these people. I mean, hundreds of people have written to me after this book came out to tell me about their experiences. And I found this interesting. So the people who could open up to me most about what happened, their parents are dead. And still, the ones who, of course, there's few, but the ones who still have parents alive feel this divided loyalty, because to admit what happened to them is to somehow blame their parents, and they don't want to do that. Do you feel that? I actually didn't, because my father was a very loving man. I'm sure some of the audience remember him. He's a very sweet man. And he said the worst day of his fathering life for me was sending me off to that school. So he knew it was wrong. But you touched on it. It was the done thing.
There's a photo there of you with your sister Diana.
Yes.
Were you able to confide in your siblings? Did they know what was going on? Because you said that photo was captured just before you were going. You had that agony, that anxiety in the pit of your stomach.
Well, Diana was great as an older sister and very loving and caring, but I never discussed it with her. In fact, the first time I told my family about it was 18 months ago. My surviving sisters, I told them about it because I didn't want them to be appalled when it came out.
How did they respond?
They were so deeply shocked, and they can't read it.
Really? Yeah, I can imagine. The other thing that I was just wondering was, you know, having spent your life, you know, dealing with, for many obvious reasons that we don't need to go into now, the kind of prying of the media, people being interested in your personal life and all of those things, did that make it harder to write a book like this that was so exposing? Because, I mean, you've argued for a long time since your sister's untimely and tragic death, you know, that sort of delving into people's lives and that sort of bullying and so on should not be a part of, you know, a person's life just because they happen to be in the public eye.
Well, when I started to address what had happened to me at this school, I did it as a very personal thing. It was a little file on my computer about that. And then I met, just by chance, a man came to my house. He was mending some candlesticks. And he told me about, things I couldn't possibly talk about on television that had happened to him. And then at the same school, he was a year younger than me. And I jotted them down. And then I said, I can't take this down. And he grabbed me by the arm and he said, you have to write it for all of us. So I did.
You say all of us. You've had the most overwhelming reaction from men coming forward, feeling things that they haven't, been able to talk about for decades.
It's extraordinary. I've had letters from all over the world. There's a man who's 75, lives in New Zealand, who went to the same school as me, obviously a long time before me, and he still suffers from hearing loss in his left ear because a teacher at the school punched him so hard in the back of the head for looking out of the window. So it's been absolutely staggering. And actually, when I went to the celebration of Harry's Invictus charity, a woman stopped me in the street and she says, I'm a therapist, and I want you to know so many of my clients have read your book and it's opened up. And I think you've touched on something there, Mylene. Is that men are not... I know it's a cliche, but men find it very difficult to open up about extreme vulnerability. And so that's been the reward, really, is I get these lovely letters from people and wives and daughters who understand their husband or their father now because they went through something like this.
How did it affect your whole life because of what you've gone through? And did it affect your whole life?
Yeah, well, it definitely did. I mean, to be abused as a child, it stays with you forever. I'm sure, sadly, there'll be a lot of people watching this who can identify with that. And, yeah, I think what it did... I mean, in terms of my mental makeup, I think I've always been in this fight or flight mode as a result. And then I know these are sort of big words, but attachment's very difficult for me. Actually, one of the things I came to terms with in this book, I'm always a fixer and I want to make people happy, people pleaser and all that. I realised that part of me died at that school, and that's fine. I could put it to bed now.
It's a very difficult thing to have to voice, though, isn't it? And an awful thing to have to live with. And I'm guessing part of this is a cathartic therapy almost. But you have also described it as reclaiming your childhood. It's like owning a time in your life that wasn't yours.
Yes. Well, before I went to that school, my family nickname was Buzz because I was like a hyperactive bee and of excitement and happiness. And there were good times at the school because there were good fellow pupils and I've made friendships for life. It wasn't all hell. But I lost that spark for quite a long time. And by writing this book, I have reclaimed Buzz is back. And that's really helpful to me to think that other people have had something good come out of this book.
And how do you feel about boarding schools now? Do you agree with them or...?
Well, actually, I don't think, as personal view, I don't think children under, say, 13 should go to boarding school. I realise there are circumstances where that is preferable. I had boys who were at the school with me who had really difficult family lives, and it probably was better for them to be at a boarding school.
Maybe not that one.
Maybe not that one, actually. But there are a lot of my contemporaries who look back on it and they look back on the good times and are not so worried, but they weren't actually abused, I'm sorry, he's long dead, but it was down to a very bad headmaster living his fantasy. And I called it a very private school because it's relevant. It's back in the 70s. We had no access to a telephone. Forget cell phones, mobiles. And we had one letter home on a Sunday, which was looked over by a master before it went. So we had no communication with our families.
It's just such a shocking thought. And, of course, we've been ruled for generations in this country by men, in particular, who had the same sort of experience as you, and I'm sure that's shaped us as a nation in a way as well.
Well, I think you're right. I think, Mariella, it has to be logical that a lot of those men were very damaged by these childhood experiences, and then they went on to be significant figures in the British Empire or in the House of Commons or something, and they brought their hurt with them, yes.
Charles, it's an incredible read, and like we say, you'll have made such a difference to so many people to spark a conversation that they never thought they could. We did get in touch with the school, obviously,
Yes.
and this Madewell Hall come back to say it was sobering to read about the experiences of Charles and some of his contemporaries, and we are sorry that this was their experience. We were dismayed to read about the allegations of abuse. We continue to encourage anyone with similar experiences to come forward. And this is the problem. You spent so many years not saying anything, and that's part of what the book has been doing such a good job of. A very private school. Charles Spencer, thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you've been affected by anything we've just discussed with Charles today, please head to our website where there are some very useful information and tools.